He's going to give details about the secret services and a lifetime of encounters with this mantis and different alien beings. He will give us an update, and I think this is going to be interesting because UFOs are part of my life, and one day you might get to hear it. Okay, Simon, over to you. I think we got most of the people back in, and I'll give you the 5-minute warning. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Sound okay, yeah? Good job. Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be invited. Thank you, Miles. I'm also very, very keen to meet someone that I have a great deal of respect for. That's Mary Rodwell and some of the other speakers. So, you know, I'm going to be really looking forward to listening to their talk. I'm only on for an hour. Those of you who've been to my other conferences or talks know that I can come on for 3 or 4 hours. So I thought I'd give you something a little bit different. The blurb that's just been read out is courtesy of Miles. I'm going to actually talk about something that is very, very sort of human, and it's about what happens when somebody goes public. What I experienced, how the media treated me, how my political party treated me, what actually occurs when somebody says the sort of things that I've said. And that's part one. The second part, I'm going to talk about jinn and shadow beings. These are entities that don't really come out very much, so we're going to talk about that. And then finally, just a little bit about change. This is about change, this conference. It's about how humanity is and needs to develop and change. And perhaps we'll have a little talk on that. And then, if we're working well, we'll have 5 minutes. If there are any questions, I'd be delighted to take them. Okie doke. Let's see if the human technology is working. Okay, so the established media and going public. I went public in 2011. And we're going to perhaps talk about how that impacted. I want to talk about magicians, shadows and jinn, simply because I don't really like the word dark evil or dark magic. It's the word that's used and understood. But if you've got shadows and jinn, then you are talking about Illuminati, you are talking about satanic practices, and you are talking about some very, very gifted masters of magical. And then all change is literally the DNA change that is occurring and needs to occur to humanity to make the shift or the change, whatever you want to call it. Okay, excuse me, the established medium going public. So it's worth reminding ourselves actually what I said. So I'll very quickly do that. What I said was that my mother worked for MI5, which is the British Security Services, the BSS, although she was really working for the National Security Agency of America, the NSA. But because she was a British subject, she had to be handled by the Internal Security Services. My grandfather worked for what became MI6, that is called the SIS, Secret Intelligence Services, and he was really working for the CIA. My grandfather had what we would call, or you might be aware of, as an Illuminati background. I have seen UFOs, I've seen the occupants of these UFOs, and I've got pretty close to them, and that my soul is not very human. So that's what I went public with. Let's see what happened. Okay, I was interviewed by Amash, and that was in the days when Miles and Joanne were doing that. That sort of led to local, national, world newspapers, local and national radio, and the BBC and the ITV. The very first interview I had was from what's called the Johnston Press, which is an Illuminati Freemason controlled paper. And I got a phone call the day before warning me that this paper was going to try and do an interview and really try and make me look out to be a nut. And it was very interesting because when I got the call, the guy said to me, "Are you standing by everything you said on the Amash videos?" And that was my chance to say, no, actually, it wasn't true, leave me alone. But I didn't. I said, yep, I'm standing by everything I've said. And I think that caused some problems. I am an elected Labour councillor for the town I live in. I'm very proud to say to you that I was elected after I went public. That was very important because nobody in the establishment could turn around and say, you have lied to the people. The people knew exactly who they were getting, what they were getting, and they still voted for me. And that is a real problem for the establishment. It does cause jokes. I'm not in my suit today. I'm deliberately doing that because I did a probe conference recently, and people said, oh, he must have been sacked. He's not in his suit. And Miles on 2 occasions have phoned me up and said, there's rumours going around the network that you've been kicked out. No, I'm not kicked out. I should be standing for re-election, and the party has actually come to me and asked me to take a higher office. So this is the problem for the establishment. They can't understand how somebody can come out with what I've said, yet still hold political office, still make the decisions and the judgments, and be just like anybody else. That's a real problem for them. Okay, in 1971 I had what I would call perhaps my most important experience. Researchers refer to an agreement you might make with an alien being as a soul agreement. At the age of 12 years old, I didn't use the word soul agreement. To me, it was the bargain. It was the bargain. In 1971, I had an experience where I believe I was away from this world for 2 days, but in reality, it was probably away for 5 to 6 minutes. And if you've seen any of the other videos I've done, well, I'm not going to bore you with that. But I've used this because up until 1971, the Saturday of this experience, I collected stamps, like many boys. I collected matchbox tops. My mother's contacts were all over the world, as you can imagine. And my grandfather had been a British diplomat. Not only was he working for MI6, he was a British consul. He'd been awarded the OBE, the MBE, the CBE, and he was offered a knighthood, and he turned the knighthood down. So these people were going all over the world, and I used to say, bring back matchbox. And I would cut the matchbox top off and stick it on a book. I had a good collection. And I collected coins. The day after my experience, I stopped collecting stamps, stopped collecting matchbox tops, dabbled a bit in coins, and suddenly started collecting fossils and Stone Age implements. There was a massive change. We don't really have a lot of time to talk why that was. Here's the agreement. Those of you who are not familiar with this, would you like to be like us, to have knowledge and understanding, to see the future and know the past, to have power and, the word that's missing is authority. And I was so excited that instead of communicating mind to mind, which is how you must communicate with creatures from the fourth dimension, I just blurted out yes, because I was so excited. So this was what researchers call a soul agreement. To me it was just a bargain, and then his hand came off my shoulder and he said, then come with me. So this was a life-changing point for me, and I think it gave me a lot of strength for the future things to come. The creature who I'm familiar with referred to itself as I'm your mother, and I think when the press got hold of it they said, Councillor's mother is a 9-foot green alien. You know, it's not my biological mother. Often when mantid or mantis or manta interact with children, they need to gain that child's trust and respect. And the female in the human family is generally the nurturing, so it would always present itself to a child as a grandmother, an auntie, or a mother. That's actually quite common. 9 times out of 10, the human child rejects the alien and says, well, you're not my mother, or you're not my grandmother, you're just a great big green bug. For whatever reason, I accepted this creature as my mother. So that's interesting, I think. And as a young child, I didn't call my human mother mother. I called her daddy, because why would I call her mother when I've already got a mother? And then you realise when you grow up in human society that's not acceptable and causes a lot of problems. So you learn to play the game. You learn to adapt to the culture that you're in and work with that culture. So I was presented with a creature from the fourth dimension, which is known as a mantid in England, which was my mother, and then I was presented with a creature from the fourth dimension, which we would call a draconis reptilian, and this creature presented itself as my dad. My father. Clearly, it wasn't my father in the biological sense. I was very, very fortunate to work with a guy from America who was almost like a forensic artist, David Chase. And he, this is my own drawing, and he, over many, many weeks, by email, helped me to create this. When you're a small child, those are residual wings. They're too big. When you're a child, that's what really, I'm sure, took my eye and my attention. So they're probably too big. I also think now that I probably got David to make his waist a bit too fat, but the rest of the proportions I'm very pleased with. So white-scaled creature, red eyes, an albino, part of a royal line, the king, and this is a creature that, as I say, I would refer to as Dad, or Daddy when I was a little boy. So home life, I'm married, and the thing for my wife was all the bloody reporters at the door all the time. That was the hard thing for her. So she just disappeared upstairs while I dealt with that. And the political side, you might be interested. I know the establishment cannot believe it. I haven't had one phone call from my party telling me to stop. And the fact of the matter is that when you go up to the top of all the major political parties, they know what the truth is. And recently just had what we call a selection meeting. Every 4 years when you're in politics you have to resubmit yourself, and that is their chance for, whether you're a conservative or a liberal or what have you, for the party to say, you know what, no thank you. And I did my selection meeting last week and got an email saying you're through, thank you very much indeed. So somebody somewhere is doing something, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. Okay, I have had attempts to warn me off or shut me up or kill me. Those of you who have followed my cases know that in 2012 there was unfortunately what the police referred to as a car incident where I was rammed at 60 miles an hour. But we'll talk a bit more about that later. I have the low-level harassment which many people who are researchers get. For instance, a prominent local mason will park his car about 1 inch in front of mine and 1 behind, so that I can't move my car for 2 or 3 days. Or I'll get notes stuck under my windscreen wiper which says, secret information. When you open it, there's a drawing of a penis. So, yeah, this is what they do. This is low-level stuff. Okay. And then the FMM, which is a faction of the Masons. So it's the Masonic group. I wanted to get this clear to everybody. You know what? Most Masons do a fantastic job. I know many of them. They give up their time for the community. They don't get paid for it. In the town I live, there's what we call a Boxing Day dip, where people can come and dress in costumes. It's all for charity, and they'll run into the sea and raise money for charity. Without the work of the Masons, that wouldn't happen. So when on the internet you read about the Masons, let's be realistic. We're talking about the top 2 to 3%, because all the other guys just don't know what's going on. The top 2 to 3%. And about 4 weeks ago I had another car incident, a very half-hearted attempt to do me some harm. I didn't come to anything. What was interesting was that, and I gave the details to the police, the registration of the car, the make of the car, model. They phoned me back and said the car's on false plates, because that registration is not coming back to that car, and if we go round to the house, the officer said to me, you know what, we'll probably find a dear old lady who hasn't a clue what's going on, so we can't take it any further. I'm sure, like many of you who are involved in our industry, you get your phones and your emails hacked and you get intercepts. And when I was actually with a MASH, unfortunately the number of attacks that were being directed against a MASH grew to such an extent that I had to withdraw myself. That's why I pulled out from a MASH, simply because the number of attacks coming against me personally got to the point where it was too much. Has anybody not seen the birthday card? Have you all seen it? You have seen it. Have you actually seen it physically? Do you want to have a look? Can I sort of start this off? I'm going to leave the camera. Someone's going to get really cross with me. Can I start it here and then pass it along? And then if it can go all the way around, and then I'll tell you what, there's someone at the bottom here who's going to collect the bits I'm going to hand down. So if it can all end up down the bottom here, I'd be really grateful. So what you're looking at there is my birthday card, very briefly. Went to a shop called Card Factory. Whitby's a small town, there's only 12,000 people, and when a new shop opens, everybody goes there. And I went there, and there's this card on a rack. And I thought, that's odd, because that's me. And I didn't give permission for that, and I don't have any memory of that at all. So I took the cards and cut a very long story short. Spoke to the chief executive of Card Factory, who gave me the contacts where he bought the picture from. And that was Paper Chase, got through that. A photo library. A photo library are based in Seattle, in America. And interestingly enough, 75% of all birthday cards or greeting cards that you buy in Britain, the copyright is held in Seattle. And they refused to do anything for me, simply just saying, look, English law does not cover you here, so we're not going to do anything. And I learned from the managing director that they had produced 6 of these cards that are going around, and of the 6 cards they produced, the only store they sent them to was my store. So I guess that whatever was sitting next to me has been airbrushed out, and an big fat teddy bear has been put in there. Okay. So who's this? This is MI, what we call MI5. This is MI5, who have taxpayers' money to play games, theatre. It's not actually a warning. It's actually just saying, you know what, you're on the right track. We know what you're up to. Here you go. They could have put that through the letterbox. They could have put it on the door, but you know, they did a great big theatrical game, and that's what they do. So, yeah, the car's been identified as a Phantom 4 Rolls Royce. I have no memory of being in that car. That's not a clone. That is me. But when I made that agreement, I know this is quite hard for many people who are perhaps new to our subject, but they have the ability to take your soul out of your body, and you can do an exchange. I know that sounds really crazy, but they can do an exchange. So your soul goes into another body, their soul goes into your body. And you know what, if you wanted to go around and have lots of high-level meetings in my body, that's the way to do it, because no one's going to bat an eyelid with that. So that's what that is. And I would be in their soul. I have plenty of memories of being in one of their bodies and going out and doing stuff. So if I remember that side of it, they'll remember that side of it. That's like a real sort of student exchange, isn't it? Okay, supportive actions. The birthday card is supportive. I get lots of tip-offs. I get people from the security services letting me know anything negative that might be happening. The Huffington Post did a very, very positive story on me, and then a little while later somebody lent on them and they wanted to do a very negative story. And this particular journalist was pretty vicious, and somebody from the NSA, because he was an American, saw him off. So do get help. There is direct intervention. The police are incredibly supportive. You know what, and I've often said when I tell people, that's not for today, but when I tell people my stories, they say, well, which police force do you have? So I'm very, very fortunate about that. I just think when you put my national insurance number on the screen, something must come up. So we're going to talk about the game changer. You will perhaps have seen the filing notes. It's worth going over because it really changed the game. Up to this point, the newspapers, the media were attempting to cause a lot of difficulty with me. So let's talk about the history. Since 1963, the Americans have had a radar base only sort of 12 miles from where I live. And you've seen the famous golf balls on an analog radar display. And it was replaced a few years ago with a phased array pyramid. This is the only one in the world. It's a 3-facing array which looks around 3/4 of the globe. It's actually called the space radar. Okay, we've got a lovely, lovely study of it here. It's a really beautiful picture. And you get some size of the scale of it and what have you. Really beautiful. It's not British. It's called RAF Fylingdales because it's on an RAF base, but it's run by the Americans. And this is a picture that you're not supposed to see. Give you an idea of what it's really like. Okay. So I actually got a tour of one of the most secret bases, not just in Britain but in the world. And I think that it was this that changed the media because, you know what, let's remind ourselves. My mother worked for MI5, my grandfather worked for MI6, I see aliens, etc., etc., etc. And then he's been invited to have a 3-hour tour around one of the most secret bases in Britain. So very, without giving too many names away, let's talk about that. At the time, my daughter had a civilian post in a structure that was run by the British Army, and she's been, I think, to 2 of the Queen's garden parties, and at one garden party she was approached by somebody who said, "I know what you and your dad are looking for. I can get you into any base in Britain." And she told me, and I said, "Well, you know, I get this all the time, ignore it." Well, it did happen, and you know, the story goes, turned up on the gate, and you know, it's the Ministry of Defence Police who do guard them with machine guns. And just very polite man said identification, and my daughter passed her identification, and I went to hand him my identification. He just raised his hand up and said, "That won't be necessary, sir." So they're obviously ready for me. We went in, and you have a PowerPoint presentation, and it explains actually what the centre does. So here we've got an official slide. This isn't made up, this is one of the slides that they'll show you if you get to the base. Coming up. And this is a reduced, we call this the fence. Any supposed ballistic missile that enters the fence is detected. However, really this covering is almost 3/4 of the Earth's globe. But they don't want to show you just how much of it they can cover. They say officially the radar goes up between 6,000 and 12,000 miles. In actual fact, it goes up to about 26,000 miles. Now, your concept of a radar will be like most people's concept of a radar. A white light moving on a screen and a blip showing up. That's not what this does. This takes pictures. This takes photographs electronically, electromagnetic energy. And when you go into the control room, there is a picture of the International Space Station. And it is so beautiful that it looks like it's been taken with a good quality digital camera. It's been taken by this at something like 3,000 or 4,000 miles distance. So it's about taking pictures of things out there. When Ronald Reagan was forced to react to that very famous video of an energy beam weapon being fired from Pine Gap in Australia. In fact, there were 2 fires, 2 shots. But the main one that most people see is the Pine Gap one, and then the UFO doing a sharp turn away. And Reagan was so pressured that he came out with, well, we're conducting Star Wars practices. That's actually what he said. So here was a demonstration when this went live. A lot of CND people came and started to protest against the Star Wars aspect of this facility. So I got to the gate, and the presentation was this. We were shown this, which is a missile, and we were told, "We see these," and then we were told, "We see these." And then, just for my benefit, because nobody else who had been there has ever said this happened, we get this. We don't see these. Now, interesting, of all the pictures of the UFOs that he could have shown me, he showed me the sports model from Area 51 that Bob Lazar worked on. Of all the UFOs, he could have gone for a caricature or a cartoon. He actually went for that, which I think is very telling. And then he said, "Ha, ha, ha, we sometimes see these." And what he's saying to me, amongst a group of 12 other military people, is, for God's sake, please don't ask any questions about UFOs. Don't embarrass us. And that was especially for me, because 2 other people who have done the tour confirmed to me they'd never got that element of it. So we're going to look at some pictures. These are not pictures that I've taken, I wasn't allowed to. These are official pictures, they're staged, but it will give you an idea. Just before you walk in, all the screens change. So the real information they are watching disappears, and then you just get some bland picture of the Earth coming up. But it will give you an idea of what it looks like. And you know, you're disappointed because you think, well, where are all the computers? Where are all the big screens? You know, that looks just like an office. But that's what modern technology can do for you. Let's look at the main screen. You'll only ever see one picture of the front, and that's it. This is the crucial part. The screens at the front are the screens that pass the information to them. What you're not seeing is to the right of this picture is a complete glass panel where the Americans sit behind a key code door. And when a contact of any sort comes up, these guys who are RAF personnel stand up and walk away from their seats. The Americans open the door, come in and take charge of the facility. And then when it's finished, the Americans then go back and the door is shut. Because the NSA runs this facility. And I saw the Americans sitting there talking. Couldn't hear them because it's a soundproof glass. And the literature you get talks very much about how it's a shared partnership with the Americans, etc., etc., etc. But when you talk to the staff, they make it absolutely clear. They're the technicians. They operate the equipment. They don't make the decisions. I'm going to just pop this around. We did, through a MASH, a Channel 4 interview, which became known as the infamous Channel 4 interview. And I got interviewed by a company called Off the Fence, who spent an hour and a half interviewing me about my mother and my grandfather's work in MI5 and MI6. And then we did 45 minutes on a public road with this station as a backdrop. I got a phone call from this base saying to me, "We're not happy about this. We don't really want you to do it." And I said, "Well, it's too bad, I'm going to do it." "Okay, which television company?" "Channel 4. I then had a call from Channel 4 saying they were cutting all of the interview about MI5, all of the interview about MI6, and any pictures or relevance to the radar base. And they'd been told by the Ministry of Defence that if they didn't do that, they couldn't, they just wouldn't be allowed to operate. So the show that went out really didn't give you half of what we had talked about. And there's an incident in that where we were followed by an Audi. And of course, I'm afraid television's so rubbish these days, you think that was all planned. It wasn't planned. We were genuinely followed and chased by an Audi vehicle. I was in my 4x4 with a 3-litre engine, and I outran it. And the camera guys, there was a man and a woman, were absolutely terrified, absolutely worried. Now, what I'm going to do is show you this. This is an envelope. My contract from Off the Fence. And if you understand anything about the Illuminati, you know that it has to be in plain sight. They have to warn you about what they're going to do. And because I've come from an interesting background, I knew that when I opened it, I had to completely open it. You wouldn't think of doing this, guys, but you have to open it like this. I'm going to put it round, because why would there be a very interesting drawing on the inside of the envelope? So I'm going to just pass it around and you can have a look. And we do the same thing. Can it start here and go along? This is a message, and if you understand what it means, then you know what you mean. So I knew what I was going to get from those people. 50 years, 1963, 2013. I went in 2013. It was 50 years of a radar base. I'd been invited on that special celebration, and I'm not in the photograph here. This is a publicity shot. The real key people are right at the back. Their faces pixelated out. I had this wonderful tour, and at the end of it, 3 hours, there are some of these military guys who run scout groups, all very laudable, very good. And so they were given free flags and pennants and, the stuff that you can raise money at Jamboree. And the guy was standing next to his trophies because they'd won cricket and inter-services football. And he said, to us while we were doing this, look at these, and these are good, aren't they? And he showed me he showed us, but he was standing opposite me, 4 commemorative coins, which looked like medals. And I said to him, "Oh, they're nice, aren't they?" And he said, "Oh, yes," he said, "they are very nice." He said, "I can't give them to you, I'm afraid, because we've only a limited number of 500. The Americans have authorised them." This is exactly what he said. "The Americans have authorised them, we've had to pay for them. So we do try and get a donation to make the money back." But he said, "I can't give it to you." He said, "We give them to generals, because this is, we've been here 50 years, prime ministers, presidents, people like that." And there were 2 guys next to me who were obviously getting their pennants and their flags. And I said to him, "Well, couldn't you present it to me?" And the 2 guys standing sort of burst out laughing, what you stupid man, And the laughing soon stopped when the guy said, "I don't see why not." And so he presented with it. I'm going to make sure I get this back. This is a limited number. There are only 500 in the world made. It is a criminal offence for me to sell it. I can only pass it to my next of kin. And I think it's number 48. I beg your pardon, 86. It's 86 of 500, and he had to write my name. He said, "The Americans insist that I take everyone's name against one of these that we present." So he presented it to me, and the 2 guys next to me were waiting for their presentation, and the guy just closed the box up, and they said, "We have to go now." So I'm going to pass this around, you can have a look at it. On one side it's got the logo of the Royal Air Force, on the other side it's got the radar base. Okay, so I'm going to pass it around. Okay. So that was the memento, and what happened afterwards, the Channel 4, which we talked about. And then Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby, I don't know if you ever saw that, that was very interesting. Originally they wanted to interview me with a psychologist. And they said to me, we've been told that we're not to interview you as a psychologist, you have to be interviewed on your own. I thought it was very nice. Went along. I actually refused the first time. I generally, don't want to interact unless I feel there's a reasonable level playing field. And I was asked to do 2 drawings, one of Mum, one of Dad, which I did. And the producer came back to me and said that we're not allowed to put this one up, which is the reptile. They weren't allowed to put the reptile one up, but they were allowed to put that one up. That's very interesting. So there's me being interviewed with Philip Schofield. I will tell you that Philip Schofield is an incredibly enlightened man, hugely intelligent, and he said stuff to me. He said, I can only say this to you off camera. He understands about souls, reincarnation. He's studied cultures of the Far East. An incredibly decent man, and actually he's tried now to get me back twice more. Genuinely, I had other... It's always like, can you do it in 3 days' time? And no, I can't, because I've got other appointments, and I don't just drop things. But he's very, very keen. So not everybody in the media is brainwashed, but most of them are wedded to their big fat salaries, and are not prepared to stick their head above the parapet. So there's zooming on Mum, which we were allowed to do. I then got an invitation to join a branch of the Illuminati. I've actually brought that with me. I'm not going to put it around you tonight, but if during the lunch break or something, if you want to have a look at that, you can. And I actually said, why is a secret organisation using an application form? It seems to break it. And they said, because in your case, we think all the I's need to be dotted and all the T's need to be crossed so that we know what we're getting and you know what you're getting. So a very interesting document. It shows how you progress through the magic training. There are 3 different lines. I come from a magical family, a non-satanic. Well, my grandfather was satanic, my mother wasn't. I come from a magical background. We'll talk more about that. So I had the application form, which I was supposed to destroy if I wasn't going to join. I didn't join, and I'm very happy for you to share it and have a look at it, but it doesn't leave my sight. And from those heady days of Amash, when the Sunday Sport wanted to do a destroying piece on me, to quite recently the Wall Street Journal. Yes, the Wall Street Journal interviewed me for 45 minutes on aliens. That's the change. This is the change in the media that's occurred now. And when the new Pope stood up and said, I am prepared to baptise aliens, which he did, 6:30 in the morning, I was actually in Glastonbury in my bath in the hotel, ready to do a talk, and BBC Radio 4 phoned me up and said, Pope has just made this announcement, you're the first person we come to ask for your opinion on that. So remember, and I use this picture and other things, that aliens don't exist officially, but you know what, the Pope will baptise them. Interesting. Okay, and also I decided to use my abilities to counter jinn possession in humans, you might want to call that demonic possession, and to make good in part damage caused by satanic trauma, what used to be called multiple personalities. Dissociative disorder now. So people come from all over the world to consult with me. If they can't afford to travel, then I'll do it on Skype. It takes me much longer because to use the electromagnetic waves of the Skype to carry takes much longer. And we'll talk a little bit about when the Rothschilds sent somebody to me. We'll get to that. Part 2, magicians, shadows and jinn. Okay, this is a lady who has quite a strong view on jinn, and in her view, all ETs are jinn. I don't go down that road. Thunderbirds, remember Thunderbirds made by Jerry Anderson? Anderson's made another program called UFO, and the headquarters for this defence organisation was called Shadow. And I've always said that people who make films and TVs are in the know. They have a certain knowledge. So let's talk about some of these shadow beings. These are not my drawings, these are drawings that other people have done. Became infamously known as the Hat Man. So you're looking at one child's drawing on the left, And then someone here saying, well, I'm 36 now, but you know what, when I was 10 years old, that's what he looked like. Another drawing coming up now, here we go. And this is really good because the person who's drawn this has shown herself in what she calls a freezing cloud. So she's been immobilized. And on the right-hand side, an artist's impression of the Hat Man. Now, let's talk about this. Oh, too sensitive. Some shadows appear to be solid in outline. Others appear to exude smoke. This is a key. It really is a key. The one on the right is exuding smoke. I think that's a gin. The one on the left, which is drawn, appears to be solid with no smoke. I think that's a shadow being. It's an artist's impression. Very much a reptilian-looking creature, but with the red eyes. It's good to see the red eyes, actually. That's someone knows this stuff. Problem with photographs is people say, well, you know what, they've been faked. So, do you know what? It isn't faked, but even if it was faked, this is exactly what you would be looking at. I'm going to try and use this laser pointer. Where is it? Oh, right, okay. Thank you, Miles. You're like a prompt off stage. Where are we? I'm going to move off the camera. It's going to make it cross, isn't it? Can you see that? Can you see that? Let's have a zoom in. And that's exactly what a shadow being would look like in daylight. That's cool. That's really cool. Good shot. An old photograph, but this one I would say was a gin, because you've got the smoke coming off it. Can you see it's like swirling up from it as it moves across? That's much more gin-like. Okay, next one coming up. Look about those swirls. Many people say that they can form into animals like a tiger. And here is coalescing through the tail to form a creature. All right, let's look at my picture, my drawing. I'm going to cough. Excuse me. My drawing now, and you can clearly see the smoke coming off it. In fact, as a 5-6-year-old, I called him my smoke man. He wasn't a shadow being, so that's a gin. It's got to be a gin. The smoke's coming off him. The hands up is a form of greeting, but it's actually a DNA lock. What I haven't shown here is an electrical charge that goes from one of the creature's hands to the other. He then throws it to me and I catch it. And that means that we are bonded. We have a DNA lock. Nobody else can hack in. No one else can access me. And I won't go accessing any other creature. So it's just like putting a padlock on your motorbike. Let's have another look. This is beautiful. I don't know this. Someone's just done a drawing from another person's representation, and that is a gin in my book. If someone says it's a shadow being, I respect their opinion. I'm not going to argue with anybody. I respect everyone's opinion. But to me, because the smoke is coming off that, I believe that to be a shadow. I don't believe that shadows are men in black. There are people that say shadows are men in black. No, they're not. I've seen men in black, two sorts of men in black. They are actually enforcement. That is their title, enforcement. And there's the human, who are very psychic, very gifted, and then there's the alien, which are incredibly psychic and gifted. So, to me, that wouldn't be a shadow being or a jinn. That would be either a human or an alien. Okay, when is a shadow person not a shadow person? When is a jinn? Let's talk about jinn. I've got some lovely pictures of the internet drawings, which help, I think, to explain. In the Far East, the Quran talks about jinn being smokeless fire, which is a problem because I've just shown you drawings of a jinn with smoke. But here we go, smokeless fire. So how is it portrayed? Remember, the people of the Quran have a lot more knowledge than the Western world. We assign jinn to fairies, goblins, and the modern media. Whereas, I've spoken to Muslim men, and they have a very clear idea. So this is from an Egypt television show, and it clearly shows the holy man on his carpet praying, and the jinn behind trying to tempt him. Okay, but every day we know the jinn as something like this. There's Aladdin and the jinn coming out of the lamp. Hence the word genie, you all know that. You go to the theatre, and this is good because here's the smoke. A genie always appears in a puff of smoke, which is exactly what I think we're looking for with the jinn. So there we go, that's from modern theatre. And then let's have some interesting things. Here's one. artist's representation. There's the smoke again. Another artist's representation coming up now. This is really good. Okay, does that come out all right? Yeah. You can see there's two eyes, a nose, and a head. So the head dominates, but to the side of it there's the hand and the arm, with the elbow sticking out. So everything else is strange in proportion. We have another one coming up. Okay. So remember, this is done on modern technology using computer graphics based on what eyewitnesses have actually said they've seen. I don't know that they would have seen them coming out of a lamp. I think the lamp is artistic license. That's what you expect to see, but nevertheless, the going is good there. So that's quite good. I'm going to actually show you a real photograph now, taken by the Warminster UFO group. I interpret it as a jinn. They will interpret it possibly as a fifth dimension or sixth dimensional being. There. That's a real one, I can promise you that. To me that's a jinn, but you know. Anyway. I think that's tremendous. Okay, jinn through history, when they are working with a human, they don't want to scare that human, so they will present themselves in a range of forms. Cherubim. That's one of the ways that, and as a child I have had jinn around me all my life. There is one person that I know of in this audience today who has Skyped with me regularly, and they have seen jinn around me. Unfortunately, some people it scares them away. I remember one person saw a being with red eyes, and I never saw her again. It terrified her. Yes, some jinn are difficult, but some aren't. So the trouble with a perception is that if you go into it with one view, then it's not always the case. I'm going to give you a satanic magic case one. This is a real case that I dealt with. An individual was spelled, and that's the terminology we would use by let's use the word dark magician, who was from the Illuminati, and his job was to get at her children. And he referred to her, as you would do in a case like that, as Tinkerbell. Because if you saw Peter Pan, then Tinkerbell is a jinn, which you won't know that. But that's what Tinkerbell is flying about. And so in the Illuminati, the dark magician, the satanics, he would refer to a woman who is jinn-possessed as Tink. That would be your pet name for her, Tinkerbell. Okay? So there's Tinkerbell there. I had to get rid of Tinkerbell. This particular person didn't have multiple personalities, but she did have a jinn possession, which we had to deal with. So yes, there's Tinkerbell. Walt Disney, big satanist, absolutely massive. You'll know that from your research. Excuse me, case B. Okay, those of you who've seen this, the drawing you're about to look at was made by a person who now works for the Rothschilds. Initially I thought this person had come to me for help from herself. It's now obvious that the Rothschilds had sent this person to me. Those of you who are researchers, I'm obviously going to bore you, so please just bear with it. For those of you who are not, then this might be interesting. If you are a ordinary person, and in terms of your status in society, and somebody says, you could be useful to us, it might be your bloodline, it might not be. So they'll say, you've got some children, we'll buy them off you. So in this particular case that I dealt with, this man was offered $1 million to buy his 2 children, which he sold. So he sold his 2 children for $1 million. The 2 children were tortured. Sadly, they over-tortured the boy so that he wasn't capable of running the business. Because what they do is they produce children with incredibly high IQs so they can go and work for the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers in their business. Because the Rothschilds and Rockefellers can't run the world on their own, you know. They need people to help them. So what had happened is it always passes through the male line. So because they'd done too much to the boy, they then needed the female to run the business. I nearly swore then. But they hurt her, so they needed her to be put right. Now before anybody says anything, why did I help somebody who was going to do that? Firstly, I didn't know that she was from the Rockefellers. And secondly, I don't care where somebody's from. If you're a child and you're abused, then you have the right. If you want to get better, you have the right to be made better if that's possible. So I don't put labels on it. If a person comes to me for help, I don't make a judgment, I just help them. It's up to them what they do. So, to give you an example, again, researchers, I'm sorry, you'll know all about this. So you're put in a cage, a metal cage, you're wheeled up off the floor, and then the cage is electrocuted. This begins to split your personalities because you put the pain into personality. Dr. Green, as he was in America, but before that Dr. Mengele, would have a puppet show. And then as the child was tortured, he would get the child to create a personality for one of the puppets and put the pain into that. Okay. Also, this particular young woman had been put in a cage, and then a girl with her had been murdered. Often what they'll do is they'll murder a wolf, take the skin off the wolf and place it over a child. So this particular woman had a jinn possession. She was visited by 2 reptilian entities, and she had 6 different personalities. One was a gay male. Most of these females will be bisexual. That's fairly standard practice. It took me 6 months to remove the jinn possession. It can never do it 100%, but by and large reabsorb the personalities back into the core, so that you have one personality with different flavours. When she came to me, her IQ was 134, because people like that are always checked all the time. So she's 134, and she went for a driving test, and in the country, she wasn't British, the country she went to, you had to have an IQ test before you could learn to drive. And she was 182 when she finished. So I know she now works for the Rothschilds. Had I known, I would have made them pay plenty. Okay, but I was told the reason they didn't was because they thought if I knew that she'd come from the Rothschilds, I wouldn't have helped her, which I would have done. I think that people who can afford to pay should pay me, so that the people who can't afford to pay, I can then give them the services free. That's how I work it. This is a real photograph. I don't care what anybody says to me. This is a real photograph of a jinn, which is taking a cross between a cherubim and your gargoyle that you'll see on cathedrals all over England and other countries. I think that's a really good picture. Have a close look at that. Okay, I've got another picture here, which is from a guy called Tony Z, who I know, and I'm sure people will say, well, that's a model, or that's some weird-looking fish. I know the story behind this. Look at the faces of the people around. You've got an adult holding it, and a child looking through it. Look at the faces. That's not someone who's caught a lovely trophy and is proudly showing you, this isn't the one that got away. So have a closer look at that. Remember that the jinn are part of a reptile race. They are genetically linked to the reptiles. In my estimation, jinn are interdimensional entities. They used to live in our dimension, and when human consciousness grew and grew and grew, the power of human consciousness and love pushed these creatures out, but not into the 4th dimension. They reside between the 3rd and the 4th, and that's why a skilled magician can bring them forth from the interdimension to the 3rd dimension. We're going to talk about that now. How much time have we got left, please?
You've got exactly 5 minutes.
You see, this is what always happens. This is what always happens. What do you want to do? Do you want me to carry on and not have any questions, or would you like to stop now and have questions? What would you like to do? You want to carry on, okay. We'll carry on asking questions with Sid James. To command a jinn. This is the correct terminology, to command a jinn. On the right-hand side, you're going to see, I'll pull it up. This is King Solomon's ring that you can buy in any shop. I'm sorry, that's not what King Solomon's ring looked like. But this is the vision that people have of King Solomon's ring. King Solomon's ring was a solid iron band. Had to be forged by a man, not naked, but it had to be naked from the top up, and had to use tools of iron and had to work with the heat. It's a very strong ritual process. The Return of the King. This is from the book. You've got lots of pictures of that. Look at the front cover. Look at that. Just get that in your head. Get it in your head. Let's look at the Syrian. Let's go back in a minute. So there we've got that. Let's look at that. If you can't see the imagery, well, need a bit more research. I can tell you now that in any true Illuminati household, the Lord of the Rings is a must, and my grandfather bought me a very nice copy of Lord of the Rings when I was 21, and it will always sit on any household that is part of the Illuminates, the Bible. King Solomon. Let's talk about King Solomon, because if you know your history, he commanded jinn, helped them build his palace. And on the left-hand side, you've got every representation of King Solomon's temple looks like that. That's not accurate. But I like this one because you've got the two pillars. These are the pillars either side of a portal. You know, if you have your two pillars set, you create a portal in the middle, and that's how the jinn come through. It's how the military use it. It's how many people use it. Let's talk about The Hobbit. We just looked at Lord of the Rings. Let's look at The Hobbit. The front cover of the DVD. Oh look, portal. And what I want you to do is just have a look at this. Do you remember I showed you the two pillars? There's one, there's two. It's coded information. If you can see it, there it is. You've got the two pillars, and he's leaving this world. He's leaving our world, and on the other one, he's entering the new world. Okay, this is coded information. Let's just have a look what Solomon's temple really looked like. It's probably a little bit too tall, but that is really what it looked like. We're running out of time. I think I'm going to stop. Listen, it's been really lovely to talk to you. I am going to hang around for a little bit, so if at lunchtime you want to have a chat, and I don't care whether this is your first day or whether you've got 40 years experience and you could knock me into a cocked hat, I am really happy to talk to you. So thank you ever so much. It's been a pleasure.
Simon, you have got about 2 to 3 minutes if you want to do some questions.
Okay, we've got 2 to 3 minutes. You see the power of suggestion. Okay, I will take questions. Gentleman there. It's a really good question. I approached 3 publishers. All of the publishers said they would do my book, providing I took out all the stuff about MI5 and MI6. So I said I wasn't going to prepare to do that. I am in contact with a publisher who does a lot of David Icke stuff, but he's not actually based in Britain. I really do need to get some books out. You're right. It's a priority. Any more questions? Gentleman there. Lady, who's put their hand up there? That's the lady there. Yeah, sorry, I thought it was behind you. Right, well, at Fylingdales, they're literally a hot phone to RAF, the United States Air Force Vandenberg, and they pick the phone up. The first thing they've got to do is decide whether the machine's working correctly, if it's actually correct. If it is correct contact, then they have to decide by the photograph whether it's an alien race that the American government are dealing with, or it's an alien race they're not dealing with. If it's an alien race they're not dealing with, they'll fire at it. So they'll use the energy beam weapon at Pine Gap or where else to attempt to engage it. There is a case in Britain where you have to understand that the aliens I'm aware of can read your mind. And if you watch that clip, you will see that before the beam hits that craft, it's already gone. So the only way in the early days to try and down a craft with an energy beam weapon was if it was so close to the Earth that the aliens had no time, once they read your mind, that you were going to fire this weapon to react. And there is one case in Britain where that was the case. It was a mobile weapons site that was taken round. So what the humans did was alternate all these high energy beam weapon stations so that the aliens couldn't read the human mind because it was all totally automated. So the kill rate, if you fire maybe 100 times, you might hit one. Okay, so if it was above your house, they would not engage it because they don't want that down. We've probably got a couple more questions. Gentleman over there.
Why do you think you're being allowed to get this information across by the elite? I mean, others have been stopped. Do you think because the time is changing that they now want more information out? Why?
It's a very good question. I think what you've got at the moment is a real split between the powers that be. You've got one half that's just heartily sick of things like 9/11 and the Ukraine situation, and one out. And they've just had enough of it, and they're doing everything they can to try and get the information out. You've got the old guard who are going to go down fighting. In this instance, if you let's take Alex Collier. If you're familiar with Alex Collier meets beings at a higher dimension than me. The problem is that when you go above the 4th dimension, these aliens do not interact. like this with humankind, because it's like the Federation Star Trek's thing about we don't interfere. So when Alex was getting shafted, as they didn't interfere. There's a very interesting case of in the 1980s of a jogger, a young woman who used to talk to her friends about the aliens who loved her. She went jogging in Central Park in America. A mugger came out. She didn't carry the $10 mugger's money. She said, the aliens are going to protect me. She got knifed and she got killed because she was interacting like Alex with beings from such a high level that they really believe in free will. Happily or unhappily, depending how you look at it, I interact with creatures from the fourth dimension who for thousands of years have interfered in human relations. So there is a force slightly higher than the highest government on this planet. And I've been told that there are two lists. One list are all the genuine abductees, contactees. I call myself an experiencer. That's held, and the governments of the world, which is America, has that list. It's never up to date, but they have that list. But there is a second list, much smaller, where the governments have been told, this person does not belong to you. You have no jurisdiction over this individual. You sign this individual over to us. So partly, yes, the help I'm getting is because certain elements in the services have had enough, but if anything very serious was to happen to me, people would pay a very high price. I suppose we pushed it to the limit, haven't we? What does that mean? Does that mean yes?
Okay, Simon, there is a couple of minutes.
This, what you're seeing, no, I'm just going to tell you, this is actually democracy working. You're seeing the power of your thoughts and your energies making it happen. Do you know what? And if everybody sat down in, let's talk about Trafalgar Square, and just thought, we've had enough of X or we've had enough of Y, it would happen. Anyway, okay, come on.
Sorry, Simon, just you passed this round, if we knew, if we were on the inside, we'd know what this is. Would you spill these?
Sorry, what?
The inside of this letter has absolutely no meaning.
Sorry, I don't understand.
The envelope. The envelope.
It's a robot.
Well, it says robot.
Yes.
What's it mean?
Right. Well, that means to me is an AI intelligence, artificial intelligence. It means that the people who were responsible for doing the interview were not in their right mind. So those of you who are researchers perhaps will understand what AI means. Okay, next question. Any more? I can't see because the lights have been... Guy there.
When you first experienced other beings, did you tell your parents, and how did they react?
The only person I really tell was my biological mother. And if you go back to the 1971 experience, she said to me, draw it all down, I'll show it to my friends. So she showed it to her friends. And, you know, we don't have the time, we've only an hour, but the handler, the guy who used to pass the secret information to my mother, he was very interested, he would talk to me. But I knew not to discuss it outside because it just wasn't what you'd talk about. But my mother was quite cool with it.
Was it classed as an imaginary friend?
No, I had one of those. That was a separate one. That was a creature that was about this tall. Didn't have, interestingly enough, the wraparound eyes that we have by Hollywood. It had small round eyes. So I would now know that was one of the original race of greys. And its head had a huge bulge at the back. And these creatures would come and put geometric patterns, what appeared to be in the sky, in my bedroom, but I suppose they put them on my head. They were downloading information. So that was my imaginary friend, that one. Anyone else?
Okay, Simon.
That's it. There you go.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was very interesting.